What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Correlation Nation. Today we're going to do a real quick recap of last week, and then we're going to do our first look at the UFC card coming up. I think we have an off week, and let's pull it up real quick so we have more actual, accurate information in regards to this. I know that if you're a fan of the UFC, you probably already have an idea of that's right in the way of when the next card will be. So let's see if I can pull this up. I got all this nonsense in the way. Yeah, so it looks like the next card will be May 31st. That is the Blanchfield versus Barber card, and there's some pretty good fights on here. And then there's a lot of people, to be honest, there's at least a handful of people on here I have no idea who they are. So with that being said, let's put this on pause, and then we're going to go back to the we'll just pull up UFC on Google, and the idea is to actually just kind of do a little recap of what happened, what our projections were, or who we thought we were going to win, and then just kind of go over some of the things that we talked about last week. So Gilbert Burns versus Michael Morales. I did pick Michael Morales. I didn't really see him finishing him in the first round. I'm a big supporter of Burns, but you know, the tape is what it was, and Morales is just the bigger, longer fighter, and he has cleaner striking, and he enters the pocket, exits the pocket, and he's able to get Burns out of there in the first round. The Sodiq Yusuff and Marion Santos. This is one I was a little bit surprised by. So I remember in my video I was actually talking about this, and based off the tape I had seen, Santos didn't have what I would consider great footwork. He did, he's kick heavy attack mostly, and he's just kind of there. And I thought, and I remember mentioning this, you can go back and actually see it. I remember talking about this and saying that, if you use a kick heavy attack and you're not using your footwork real well, when you throw these kicks, you can be countered. And Sodiq has pretty good boxing, so I anticipated him actually trying to crowd Santos and really put a little bit more pressure on him. But he was actually really, really willing to just stand at kicking range and try to implement a boxing strategy. I don't know, it made no sense whatsoever. He got his butt whooped, and I was a little bit surprised that he just stood at kicking range and took the beating he took. But nonetheless, you got to tip your hat to Santos. He looked pretty good. I think all in all, he's a really well-rounded fighter. Something he showed in this fight is, while he was taken down, he was really, really quick to get up. Got to a hip. Instant. As soon as he was taken down, he was already up on his butt, on a hip, and right back to his feet. So that was quite impressive. And he's a younger fighter, so look for him to continue to try to improve and work his way up the rankings. The Dustin Stoltzfus and Nursultan. This is one that I thought was actually the easiest fight to predict, but I was surprised that Dustin put up the effort that he did. One thing that I guess I overlooked is I didn't realize that Nursultan had actually moved up. I think he moved up a weight class in this. I didn't know that was the case, and I thought that his power was going to be a little bit too much for Dustin, and I actually thought he would just knock him out, because Dustin has been knocked out quite a few times recently. But nonetheless, he did win the fight, and that's kind of what we anticipated. The Julian Erosa and Milky Costa. This is a fight that was just a war, honestly. And the one thing that I overlooked in this, so I went Erosa, and I thought that his grappling would be just a little bit too much for Costa. But honestly, there was a speed discrepancy in this fight. Costa was quite a bit faster on the feet. I really didn't take into account how much faster he was than Erosa. But, Erosa, just being a dog, weathered the storm, and bit down on the mouthpiece, and he made it a pretty good scrap. you got to tip your cap to both these guys. It was a phenomenal fight. A lot of the fight fans, this is kind of what we like to see, and good for them. And honestly, I'm a big Costa fan, so I wasn't necessarily upset that he won that fight. A little disappointed that I missed something in my breakdown, and that was the speed discrepancy. So, anyways, was what it was. And then we're gonna go on to the preliminary card. Wow, Gabe Green. This is one that I kind of just leaned Camilo. Gabe Green being out for a while, I was very aware that he was a pretty solid fighter. He's won some pretty good fights against some other solid fighters, but I just thought Camilo, being younger, up and coming, hey, he's coming in the UFC for a reason. And then Green with the ring rust, I thought would be a real thing, and I thought would be something that he wouldn't overcome. Certainly lost the first round, but came back in the second and was able to secure a submission in that, and looked pretty good. He came down a weight class. I was aware that he was doing that, and we'll see if he's able to build on that. Wasn't quite as aggressive that he's been in his last 2 fights. He was fairly aggressive in those fights. And then Jared Gordon. This was another one that just caught me off guard. I really thought, I thought this was a fight that Moises was going to win. And, Gordon, I remember looking at this and I'm like, Gordon hasn't really knocked anyone out in a long time at the UFC level. Honestly, I think he only has had only one knockout at the UFC level. Maybe I'm wrong, but if my memory serves me correct, he'd only had one UFC knockout, and he absolutely starched Thiago Moises. So, good for him. Wasn't really the way I've seen that fight going, but good for him. And then the Yadier Delval, or Davai, or however you pronounce his name. Yeah, the dude looked like a huge favorite. Honestly, I thought Conor would show a little bit more. But to be honest, he looked old. Something about him just looked off. And Yadier, he looked absolutely phenomenal. Not just in the fight, but just physically, tip-top shape. And he looked really, really good in the fight. So I think he's a guy to keep your eye on. Luana Santos, that fight played out about the way I thought. I thought that Lisboa would probably be the better striker. I don't think that it was that far apart on the feet. But the one thing I thought is that she didn't have great footwork, and she definitely would enter the pocket where Luana would have a chance to potentially get this fight down, and she would dominate from that position. And really, that's exactly the way it played out. Denise Gomez, this fight also went exactly the way I thought. She just kind of ran over Alicia. I seen people predicting her to get a submission, but, she didn't have to go that route. She doesn't really... I don't know that she has any submissions on her record, so not to say she couldn't do it, but I just thought, her tendency is to use her power and try to knock people out. So I thought that's what would happen, and she was able to complete that task in the second round. I actually didn't see these fights. I missed them. So it's hard for me to talk on this too much. But, Park obviously got a submission in round 1. I did pick Hernandez. I thought the value was there, and I thought Hernandez would be able to use his footwork. I noticed that in his tape, he used his footwork to really kind of skirt around the cage a lot, and so I thought he was going to do this. But unfortunately, that's not what happened, so I was on the wrong side of things in this fight. I do need to go back and watch some tape on this just to see how that actually played out. But, it only was a half of one round, and that was that. And then the Tisha Pennington and Luana Pinheiro fight obviously went to decision. Not surprised by that whatsoever. I did suspect that Tisha would probably win minutes and Luana would win moments, but I thought that Luana would win more moments and come out on the other end with a decision win. But I'll have to go back to it. And the thing that I want to say before I close this out and we move on to our first look at the other card is that I remember going into this, I knew that there was a lot of tough fights on this card to predict. And one of the things that I was curious about finding out was whether, the importance of the footwork against the pressure striker. And, when you look at Luana against Pennington, was Pennington's, kick heavy attack and, just kind of avoiding, going to get the job done against, a girl that was going to just kind of like walk into the fire and willing to, make it a scrap. Again, I didn't actually see the fight, so I'll have to go back and see how that actually played out. But clearly Tisha won that fight. And then, the same thing with Carlos. It was kind of, well, not so much him, because I don't think Park really had a kick-heavy attack. But, I thought the footwork would suffice in this one. And then let me go to the other one that I thought, which was, it had to have been on the main card. Oh yeah, it was the Sodiq and Marion, and it was kind of the same thing. And honestly, same outcome. The kicker won in both of those fights. So it looks like the kicker, with even if it is, Santos didn't quite implement the same type of footwork that Tisha would, but nonetheless, I did see him kind of in certain moments he was using lateral movement, which was a surprise to me, because I didn't even know that he really had that in him. But yeah, in both those instances, the kicker ended up walking away with a win. So it's something worth taking note of, and it's something worth using moving forward. So anyways, with that being said, we're going to close this out. Honestly, it wasn't my best night at predicting fights, but we did get some wins, and some of them were close. They were just really, really tough fights to call. So we're going to move on. We're going to go to the next card. So we're going to pull up, where is this? We're going to pull up these fights. Here it is. And I have done no tape on either or any of these fighters. So really, it's just the first look. We're going to talk about it a bit. We're going to make it real quick, real sweet, and we're going to get out of here. Erin Blanchfield going against Macy Barber. I think that, styles make fights. I don't know if Macy Barber's had a 5-rounder yet. Blanchfield has. The other thing is Barber's they're both kind of grinders, but Blanchfield definitely has more finishing upside. And she does her work from the clinch as well. So if Barber wants to engage in the clinch, I think it's going to be troublesome for her. I do see Blanchfield winning this fight. That's my early lean. Now moving on to the Gamrot versus Ludovic. Man, I'm a big Ludovic. I like Ludovic. And this is a tale of two tapes. Gamrot is a relentless chain wrestler. He has decent stand-up, but nothing spectacular. He is pretty well-rounded, but his bread and butter is just the chain wrestling. And then Ludovic Klein is a technical kickboxing striker. Not real sure without watching tape, how his footwork is. And so this is really just going to come down to can Klein keep it on the feet? Because if he forces Gamrot to fight in his world, he's going to win this. And if Gamrot can take him down, then there's a good chance that he wins this. So it's a tale of two tapes. We just talked about it with the kicker. Gamrot's a real problem, but I think Klein is too. I really do. And I'm going to lean with Klein early. I don't know if that's a smart lean. Like I said, I'm going to have to go and look at the tape. But I'm going to go with my boy Ludovic Klein. But, we'll just have to wait and see how this fight plays out. Siak Hong Ko, I probably butchered the heck out of that name. Billy Ray Goff. I don't know. Billy's kind of a dog, dude. You know, he really is kind of a dog. Let's pull some of this up real quick because honestly, I don't even remember who this guy's fought. I know I've seen him fight before. He's been knocked out twice. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. I'll have to watch a tape on this. I'm going to go with Billy just because I know he's a dog. But I'll get back with you on this. I don't really have a strong opinion. Dustin Jacoby and Bruno Lopes. I don't know. I always hear people call Lopes like without the Z, but let's just say Lopez. I don't know. Dustin's getting up there in age. Let's see how old Dustin is. 37. Has a win against Victor Petrino recently. You know, he's a real green MMA fighter. He's a physical specimen, super strong and all that, but you know, Jacoby's going to have the more technical striking because he was a kickboxer. Yeah, I'm just going to say for now, I'm going to lean with Dustin. I know that he's on the back end of his career, but he is the more technical striker. But, you know, when you get into the heavier weights, I mean, really anybody can win. It's just, you know, everybody has a puncher's chance, especially at that weight class. So, I don't know. I'm going to side with Jacoby, just more technical striking. Zach Reese going against Dusko Todorovic. You know, Todorovic has been getting knocked out quite a bit lately, and with all of Reese's flaws, the one thing about him is he hits like a freaking freight train. I mean, that dude, you know, he's willing to play off his back, which is kind of why he lost his last fight. I guess really, was it his last two fights? No, so he won 2 fights in between. I think Todorovic is a pretty good fighter, but I just don't know if his chin's going to hold up. I'm going to lean Reese, but it's with very little confidence. I mean, you know, if he's going to be that willing to play off his back, I do think Todorovic is a pretty good MMA fighter skill-wise. It's really just kind of coming down to whether his chin's going to hold up for me. Because I think skill for skill, he's the more well-rounded MMA fighter. But Reese is real long and real powerful. If he can get with the right coaches and just work on his stand-up and be more willing to, or less willing to fight off his back, it would probably help his cause. So we're going to lean with Reese, but, you know, it's with very, very little confidence. And I'll just watch the tape and we'll get a better idea of how we feel about it later. Alan Nascimento going against Rafael Filho. I'm going to go Rafael Filho. Alan's a pretty good fighter. I just think Filho is he's kind of primed, honestly. You know, he's got pretty good stand up, but his ground game is next level. He is a finisher. Let's pull up his career wins. He's got 10 submissions, 5 knockouts. He's only gone to decision twice. 1 win, 1 loss, so he split those. But, you know, he's fought some killers and, you know, lost in 2017. And then Muhammad Makayev, he lost to him, but man, he had him in major damage. I mean, most fighters would have tapped. I'm gonna just go with Jafel. And then moving on to the next fight, we have Andreas Gustafsson, and he's going against Jeremiah Wells. I think he's the bigger fighter. Gustafsson's the bigger fighter in this fight. Also the younger fighter. And he's kind of a dog, really, so, you know, part of me wants to lean Wells, but I think that Gustafsson's just going to be able to kind of grind on him for a while and eventually walk away with a win. So my early lean's going to be with him. And then Caitlin Vieira going against Macy Chasson. Should be a relatively good fight. I think Macy's the more well-rounded fighter, and she's just got an ability to find a way to win. Honestly, it's crazy because she's worked her way up to where she's at now. It's kind of hard to choose against her. I just think I lean Macy, but, you know, the tape will tell us more. Oban Elliott going against Ramiz Bahajmaj. I'm going to just go Oban. You know, he's really, really proven to be a solid fighter. Ramiz looked pretty good in his last fight, but Oban he's got that dog in him, and he'll take a beating and he'll just keep on going. So that's my early lean. Jordan Levitt going against Kurt Hollabaugh. Jordan Levitt, this is a tough one. It is a tough one. Levitt's really not a terrible fighter. He's not a great fighter, but you could say the same thing about Kurt. And Kurt, I mean, you could make the argument he even won his last fight going against, I think it was Hernandez. Yeah, Alexander Hernandez. I think the argument's definitely there. It was a pretty good fight. I picked Hernandez, but it was close. They called it unanimous, but it was certainly a close. I could have seen that being a split even. And then Jordan Levitt. I don't know. It's a tough fight to call. I don't really have a strong early lean on this one. Levitt's certainly the younger fighter. I think that Hollabaugh's probably the more well-rounded fighter overall. But then you have the age discrepancy. I don't know. Let's go with experience on this. Let's rock with Kurt. And let's watch the tape. Markel Medeiros. I don't know. This guy ain't really it for me. I think that, maybe he's got potential, but I feel like even the Austin Hubbard fight, he lost that fight. I thought he did. I don't know. For me, that's an easy lean. We're just going to go Balaji Oki. I think Medeiros definitely has probably the better striking and all that. I'll see how well his footwork is, but Balaji Oki is just a freak athlete. I don't know. Medeiros is a pretty good athlete himself. He just doesn't do it for me. He doesn't have that violence in him, at least not at the UFC level so far. So and then at the bottom we got Rian Dos Santos going against Elise Ardeline. I don't know if that's right or not. Look, this is one that you can just, miss out on. I don't know, these girls, neither of them are very good. Neither of them have done much at the UFC level. And I'm going to rock with Rayanne simply because she's younger. I feel like the competition she faced is better. Losing to Pooja Tomar, though, it was split. Man. Tatiana Alencar. Yeah, we're just going to rock with her. I think she can pull it out. But, boy, I would not be wanting to put any confidence, anything on that. We'll watch the tape. Maybe there's something there. She is ranked quite a bit higher than this other girl, but when you look at this other girl, she's already 33, and she just really doesn't do it at any level. She's 0-2 in the UFC, was 2-2 in the RXF, 2-1 in GMC, lost to Melissa Martinez. Melissa's a pretty solid fighter, though. Splitting against Shauna Bannon. I don't know. This could go either way, but we'll have to watch the tape. Like I said, I'm gonna go with Rihanna, and we'll watch the tape on this. But anyways, we'll do what we can. We'll go down, we'll break down every single fighter. We'll look at what is their approach, how do they fight, what's their tendencies. We're looking for their strengths, their weaknesses, and really we're trying to match these fighters up, because as you say, the styles make the fights themselves. That's what makes the matchup. So we're going to try to identify where these fighters are good and where they're not, or where they need improvement, and look at how they match up against one another, and then we'll make our picks. And I think, along the journey of being able to project these outcomes, it's really about identifying not just the things that I just spoke of, but where do these things fall in the line of priority, or what's the greater skill, and that's why I brought up earlier in this video that clearly these people that are kicking, they're able to maintain their distance. But if you have an extremely aggressive fighter on the other side of you, I would suspect that they're going to crowd the kickers. So you can't just be just a kicker, And if you are just a kicker, you better have phenomenal footwork. You better have good takedown defense. Because I know that if I was standing on the other side of the cage against somebody that could just kick me, I'm going to try to corral them. I'm going to try to take away that space, because if you get in their chest, they can't utilize their kicks. So clinch, wrestling, takedowns, and it just blows me away that sometimes these fighters are willing to stand at range and just get pieced up by somebody that's kicking them. So I don't know. I'm not their coach, and I'm not them, so I can't, I'm not inside their head. I don't know why they've done what they've done, or they're going to do what they're going to do. But like I said, you get, for an example, if you get a guy like Manuel Torres. Manuel is, that guy is all gas, no brakes. He's not, it doesn't matter. You're not going to put, I'm not sure if he fights at 155. But nonetheless, actually, who did he fight? He fought Dover. Yeah, so I'm not sure, if it's like Rafael Fizio or something. a good Muay Thai kickboxing style striker, really, really phenomenal. You know, he utilizes a lot of kicks. But, you know, a guy like Manuel Torres, and forgive me if these guys aren't in the same weight class, but I'm thinking they might be. Yeah, he's not going to allow him the space he needs to operate, right? Like, he's gonna get in his freaking face. So, anyways, with that being said, I'm not going to go on a huge tangent. I've already done that. I'm going to get out of here. Peace out, everybody. Catch y'all next time.